Ahead on WRAL Triangle and Two, we'll give our best guess of which team will win the national championship, and we'll provide the best Sweet 16 matchup. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Bergin, joined as always by my guy, Luis Fernandez. Luis, we start. Duke gets bounced in the second round of the NCAA Tournament by Tennessee. And Luis, I'm not going to lie to you. I think it's a blown opportunity by the Blue Devils. What say you?
Well, it's always so tough, like looking at brackets in hindsight, because you start to see how things fall out. And I mean, they would have been playing, who is it? Florida Atlantic in the Sweet 16, and you're setting yourself up for either Kansas State or Michigan State in the Elite Eight. All winnable matchups. And when March Madness rolls around, you just want those winnable matchups. So I totally understand a lot of frustration from Duke fans, from Duke in general, because everything was laying out for them so perfectly. And now my question is, in that East region, who's going to take advantage of everything laying out so perfectly and get to the Final Four? Right now, Michigan State, in my mind, seems to be the one, but still, it's going to be a very interesting way for all that to fall apart.
When I saw Duke seeding, I was counting the chickens before they hatched, Luis, because I was looking and it's like, okay, if they get Tennessee in the second round, Tennessee starting point guard out with an ACL injury for the rest of the year. And then it's like, okay, if they run into Purdue, say in the Sweet 16 as a number one seed, Zach Edey, the star player for the Boilermakers, well, you've got two Twin Towers and Derek Lively and Kyle Filipowski that would have matched up well. Obviously, Purdue gets bounced by Fairleigh Dickinson, something we'll talk about here on today's show. But it was like, that was the opportunity where I see and then say, okay, Purdue does get upset by a 16 seed. And it was just like, this should be smooth sailing for Duke. Again, I got ahead of myself a little bit here just looking at matchups.
Oh, I mean, no, I think that's fair though, because like when you looked at that region, the East region, you had a very shaky 1 seed in Purdue, a very shaky 2 seed in Marquette. I think it was KenPom actually tweeted out that over the past X number of years or whatever it's been, a team that has gotten a 1 or 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, but has not been ranked in the AP preseason top 25, has at most won 2 games. They do not advance the Final Four. They've never advanced Final Four in whatever that time frame was. So, I kind of looked at Marquette and Purdue as just kind of clock ticking. You know what I mean? So it was a good situation for Duke, but Tennessee just really took it to them. I mean, there's no other way around it. I think it was Kenny Smith after the game said, Tennessee was not a bunch of college players. There was a G League team that Duke was playing, just with the experience, the physicality. And I think that some things have been kind of said about the physicality of the team and, was Tennessee playing dirty and this and that? No, it's college basketball. Like it's a defensive oriented sport, especially in college versus the NBA. You see that physicality come into shape. And it's not just like how physical they were in terms of, hard fouls or whatever it might be. You look at like what Duke's bread and butter was. In this huge stretch of games that they've had where they've been winning all the way going back to February. And they've been dominant on the glass, especially offensive rebounds. Tennessee out-rebounded them 12-6. They've done a much better job at limiting their turnovers. Well, guess what? They had 15 turnovers in this game. They shot 6-22 from 3. It just was not good for Duke. Tennessee beat them at their own game in everything that they have succeeded leading up to this NCAA tournament.
And certainly hindsight is 2020. I can't help but wonder if Mark Mitchell plays for Duke,
sure.
if that makes any difference in the world. We really don't know the answer to that, but a scratch before the game due to a knee injury.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think he started every game for Duke this year. And he was, averaging about 9 points a game, a solid defensive presence, as a freshman. But, everyone in this tournament has been dealing with injuries. That is when you look all the way down, all the top teams, and it's just that time of the year where you do have to deal with the injuries. So it's kind of one of those what would have been, what could have been type situations for Duke. But, you have to give your hats off to Tennessee for the way they just came in there and took the Blue Devils lunch like straight up. And they're like, all right, we're moving on to the Sweet 16. We'll see y'all later. Bye. Go home.
And one other thought looking ahead to the brackets, like I mentioned, the Twin Towers Duke has like with Edey, and certainly Purdue didn't get there either. Purdue didn't even make it out of the first round, but I was looking at the bracket and how the matchups would have turned out if everything had gone chalk. Well, I know Duke was the 5 seed and would have technically been an upset over 4-seed Tennessee, but say Duke had gotten to the Sweet 16 against Purdue, it's like how many other schools would have someone of the size and skill of a Zach Edey, 7'4", someone certainly with an NBA future, let alone two players with that, and neither team gets there. I can't help but wonder that, Lewis. Now, I think for Duke, your question now is the same conversation we were having a few weeks back with North Carolina is which players are back for next season? And I've just got a bunch of question marks because I think Derek Lively's probably gone, because if he stays in college for another year, I think NBA executives look and say, hey, you know, they question his offensive game. It's something he wasn't asked to do with his current role with Duke, but certainly defense is his strong suit. Filipowski, I think, is a question mark. Jeremy Roach as well. So it's like those are really the big three where it's like I've got question marks by all three. Just my opinion, I think Lively would be most likely to leave, but I think Filipowski, you could make the case too, given his offensive ability.
Well, I mean, I think Lively, Filipowski, Whitehead. I mean, those three feel they're first round talent, and they're kind of the classic one and done type players where they can come in, have that good success freshman year, and then go, you know, tear it up in the NBA. Last time I looked at projections, I believe they're all projected as first round picks. So it would not surprise me if they left. Now we do live in a different college basketball world with NIL, where some of those players who could go straight to the league after their first year, they have more financial opportunities. Shire and that Duke coaching staff showed an ability to develop these players, you know, and I think that is going to play a pivotal role as well. Hearing them talk in the locker room after the game, they were heartbroken. The Duke players were, so it wouldn't surprise me if that the emotions start to play into that factor a little bit. But what's important to keep in mind too is they have five-star prospects coming in next year. Like Duke is going to reload. So then it becomes a matter of roster management. You know, Ryan Young has already said that he'll return. You know, he was a bit more of a role player, but you know, he'll have one more year of eligibility. I imagine Proctor, I think, would stay. We talked about Mark Mitchell and his injury. I think it would make sense for him to stay. But Lively, Filipowski, Whitehead, and then Roach, Jeremy Roach, who almost left last year and proved that he can indeed have a lot of success as a guard, you know, and see where that kind of takes him from here. I think it would not surprise me if a lot of these big names for Duke left, but that's the nature of college basketball. That's the nature of the game. And next year, I'm sure we'll be talking about Duke in a similar way, where they've got all these young, talented players who are tearing it up in the ACC, and we'll see, you know, what their future decisions will be. So it would not surprise me if these players left, but at the same time, I'm not worried about Duke's long-term picture. I think they're going to be just fine.
You don't rebuild, you reload when you're a blue blood, Lewis. And I can't help but wonder, does your production suffer as a result of having so many talented 4- and 5-star players around you, to where if you were to go to, say, another school, your production would be higher and it's, oh, look at, I'm averaging 20, maybe closer to 30 points per game, but you're much more relied upon at another program versus, say, Duke. So I can't help but wonder that. But you know, I look at the size of Lively and Filipowski, it's like if he could get it right in the pros, like, you know, I don't want to say he's a unicorn, but a 7-foot big man with some touch, if he develops the right way and goes to the right NBA team, I mean, both I think would have very bright NBA futures, just given the things that they can do with how they move with their size is just something you cannot teach in basketball.
Yeah, that's going to be, I think, one of the most interesting thing is what team do they go to? What's the fit? I mean, you talked a little bit about production. You look back to those kind of like, you know, those Kentucky years where it felt like they had a future NBA All-Star coming in every single year. Some of them didn't get that much run. You know, Devin Booker, I think, is the prime example of that. And now he's over here, you know, an All-Star, one of the best players, one of the best shooting guards in the NBA. So I don't think the production is so much of a concern. It's just with all of these players, it's always about what do you need. What is important to you on a personal level? What's going to be important to you on a professional level? You know, I think it makes sense for all of these guys to go, or at least for a lot of them to go. But, you know, we've seen teams kind of change the way they operate now, where, you know, you looked at UNC last year, who, you know, Baycott, NBA future, I think, is to be determined. But when you look at like a player like Caleb Love, who had a potential first round grade, a early second round grade, and he decides to come back because of NIL, because of the opportunities presented to them. This Duke team, they really seem to like each other. The Lively's, the Filipowskis of the bunch. And it would not surprise me if one of them ends up making a decision like that to come back. But, ultimately they're going to do what's best for them. And I think they're going to have success regardless of where they play next year.
Changing of the guard a little bit too, Lewis, because, and I'll leave this as we look ahead to the Sweet 16, but Kentucky's lost to Kansas State. This will be the second NCAA tournament since expansion in 1985, where you don't have Kentucky, Duke, or North Carolina in the Sweet 16. This also happened in 2021, Lewis. So I can't help but wonder, are those two outliers years, or are we seeing college basketball landscape shift a little bit? I think it's going to be kind of a we shall see. Go ahead if you want to hop in here.
Kansas, Duke, and UNC were all in the Final Four last year. So I've seen the stat fly around all over the place. College basketball is chaotic. It's unpredictable, but Duke, UNC, and Kansas were all in the Final Four last year. The Blue Bloods are not dead. Okay. Let's everyone take a step back. It's fun to see a lot of new teams getting their chance to shine. Some of these other teams getting a chance to shine in the Sweet 16 when you remove a lot of these Blue Bloods out of the equation. But come on.
All right. Like, Lewis, thank you for that. This is why you're here. This is why you're here, for that perspective. What do you think is the best Sweet 16 matchup as we look ahead to next weekend?
I'm so excited about the Sweet 16. To be honest, there are a lot of like really interesting matchups from like a style perspective, from just like a talent perspective. I think the obvious answer is Gonzaga and UCLA. You have number one defense or number two defense versus number one offense, UCLA and Gonzaga. You've got some players there who are older guys who have been around for a while, who are looking for their chance to shine. Jaime Jaquez Jr. and Drew Timme. Like those are some fantastic possibilities there to see what they can do. I'm also super excited for Alabama, San Diego State. Like I know. So in my bracket, just for full transparency here, in my bracket, I have San Diego State in my Final Four. So I think they play a very aggressive, very tough. I think it was Tennessee. Olivier Comois after the game said, we play in the mud. Like that's what San Diego State does too. So I think that they could kind of take it to Alabama a little bit. I'm curious to see some of the really good players that Alabama has and how they adjust to that. The Crimson Tide also have one of the best defenses in the country. So, it's not like it's going to be great offense versus great defense like you're seeing with UCLA and Gonzaga. But I think that's just going to be a fascinating stylistic matchup there. Also, I could just go down the list. I love UConn. Like UConn is playing so well right now. And that Arkansas-UConn matchup to me feels like it could be like just a street fight. Just grabbing offensive boards, going to work. I'm excited for that. And I think Tennessee and Florida Atlantic is also interesting as well, because Tennessee, riding high, coming off of a big win against Duke. A lot of people did not expect them to beat Duke. A lot of the national pundits had like Duke in their Final Four, those type of things. So it's like, okay, how do they respond to that? How do they bounce back from that? Rick Barnes does have a little bit of a history of underperforming a bit in the NCAA tournament. So Tennessee has only been to the Elite Eight once in program history. So can they get through a team that on paper they should be able to beat? 4 seed versus 9 seed, go to work. But Florida Atlantic has also been a lot of fun. They are very impressive when it comes to effective field goal percentage. So offensively, I'm excited to see how that comes together. It's going to be a fun one. Half those matchups, I don't care.
Let me hop in, Lewis. Let me hop in. I want to go back to Gonzaga, UCLA, and I'm pretty sure Drew Timme's in his 12th year of eligibility. The headband and his post-game interviews, always must-watch television because I don't know he always abides by FCC, but, at this point, he gets so fired up after the games with his headband and mustache. He's just one of those characters. And it's like, can he finally get it done? Runner-up in 2021. He's been around for what seems like forever. This is probably his final year. He would have one more year of eligibility due to the COVID season, but can he get it done? And then UCLA, they're fighting history because a Western team hasn't won the national title since 1997. So
wild,
yeah. So to me, that's like the one matchup we're seeing this weekend where it's like, oh, you could have predicted this. Maybe Bama, San Diego State, Lewis, but it's like everything else has just been Houston, Miami, I suppose too, but everything else has been like utter chaos.
If I could only watch one matchup this weekend, I would watch Gonzaga UCLA. But I don't think that's a controversial take. But it's super exciting for all the reasons that you described. Especially with the injuries that UCLA has been dealing with. Like, how do you continue to respond to that? Because they're a machine. They just keep on going. Someone goes down, next person steps up, and Jaime goes to work. He had, I wrote it down here. Hold on. He had 17, 8, and 5 steals in their first round game. And then against, who did they play in the second round, UCLA?
I got my bracket up right here, Lewis. Give me just a second here and see. You're seeing behind the scenes against Northwestern in the win.
Northwestern, that's right. The Northwestern. Against Northwestern, he had 24, 8, and 4. Like, I'm excited. That's got a great, from a narrative, style, players, that matchup's going to be so exciting.
Yeah. And you got Amari Bailey, a young guard, and then Tiger Campbell with one of the best names in all of college basketball too. And it's just like, I love his hair too. And I'll say this, I was watching one of the games this weekend where it's like he couldn't hit anything from the field, but when he's at the free throw line, he was just money. And down the stretch, they needed that to get to the Sweet 16 as well. Lewis, I want to ask you, and I will keep my shirt on when I say this, a la Eric Musselman. What was the most surprising upset to you over the weekend? I think the obvious answer is probably Fairleigh Dickinson over Purdue, becoming just the second number 16 seed to upset number 1. But like I said, this past weekend was just absolute chaos.
Yeah, no, this was fun with how chaotic the regular season was. You kind of expected some of these things. Fairleigh Dickinson, it's only happened once before where a 16 seed is beat a 1. I mean, at the same time, when you looked at Purdue, you knew they were precarious. They were just hanging out. You looked at it, you're like, oh man, I feel they're going to lose early. Who's it going to be to? And gosh, I could, if I was a Boilermaker fan, man, I would not. I don't know how I would handle it because, like, it just, Edey didn't get like any touches. He's 7'4". Fairleigh Dickinson is like average 6 foot height, and they refuse to give him the ball. Regardless, it's fine. So I mean, I'd have to go FDU. The other one would be Princeton. And I know, Mark, I know you've been Missouri grad. I'm sure you're hanging in there, but I think I saw it was a 15 seed, I believe, has made it to the Sweet 16 in 3 straight seasons. So maybe that's a little bit more predictable. But for Princeton to go through Arizona and then take care of business handily against Missouri, very impressive. But FDU for sure, hands down.
As much as I hate to admit it, it's almost like picking the 15 seed that's going to win is like the new 5-12 upset. Because every year it's like, 12 seed always beats a 5 seed. Now we're seeing this continually where it almost lets Arizona off the hook with Purdue's loss. And Fairleigh Dickinson joining UMBC. Like, I couldn't tell you who won that tournament, what year when Virginia got knocked off in the first round back in 2018. I couldn't tell you who won off the top of my head. I'd have to Google it, Lewis. I think
it was Villanova. But you don't really you remember that 16-1 upset.
Absolutely. And Virginia, obviously, the Cavaliers got their redemption the following season and ended up winning the national title and all of that. But when you look back on this tournament, those are the things you're going to remember is the big, big upsets. And yeah, as much as I hate to admit it with Missouri, that game was never even close. And Lewis, I'll be honest with you too. It's like I saw that, Arizona gets bounced. We have a favorable matchup to get the Sweet 16. And look, I'm happy with my Missouri Tigers because first NCAA tournament win over Utah State in the first round in 13 years. So, I mean, Lewis, that was before I was even in college. And so it's like, look, I'll take the win.
Yeah. No, FDU, that's something that as a program, they're going to remember for a long, long time. It's fun to have them in the spotlight. And they almost beat Florida Atlantic too. That was a tight game. So fun. We love upsets.
Lewis, most exciting players left in the tournament now that we're into the Sweet 16. I had 2. Brandon Miller from Alabama. Obviously, we know about everything that's gone on off the court with that Alabama team. On court, though, as good as there is in college basketball, and there is an NBA team that will draft him in this upcoming draft. I would be shocked if he's back beyond this season. And then how about Kansas State point guard Marquise Noel, second in all of college basketball in assists per game. He's only 5'8", throwing passes around the back, and he's just awesome to watch in the open floor. We talk about guard play in the NCAA tournament. Kansas State has a special New York point guard, Lewis, now that we're into the Sweet 16.
It's been really fun to watch him go to work. He's had a really good tournament run, and now getting a chance to play against Michigan State in the Sweet 16 at Madison Square Garden. I know it's not what the big wigs probably wanted in terms of Madison Square Garden matchups, but hey, get some of the best players out there and let them perform, at the Mecca. I think that would be awesome. I kind of look at Brandon Miller. I think, an obvious choice from a talent perspective. He didn't score in the first round, but he then 19 points, boom, just like that. He's incredibly talented. Sticking with the Alabama team, Javon Quinley. He had 13 in the first round, 22 in the second, and then he also had 22 in the SEC title game. So he's been on a bit of a heater. He could end up being a huge difference maker for the Crimson Tide. Florida Atlantic, Jonell Davis. I think that's how you pronounce his name. 12 points, 5 rebounds in that first game against Memphis. And then he had 29, 12, and 5 against Fairleigh Dickinson. So that's, wow. And then we mentioned Drew, Timmy, and Jaime Jaquez Jr. I think both of them are fantastic to watch. And then for me, because I still think Houston is kind of got to beat the team to beat.
Okay.
You have to go out and take care of them. And Marcus Sasser, I have been it's watching him like a hawk this past weekend because of his groin injury, how he responds. It looked like he was in serious pain in that first round game and re-aggravating it. And then he comes out and puts up 22 points, hit a couple of James Harden type step back threes. Houston Day, James Harden step back threes in that game against Auburn when it looked like they were in trouble early on in that second round. If he gets all the way or as close as he can get to all the way, he's going to be so big for Houston's chance to get to the Final Four in Houston.
I picked Auburn to upset Houston for that very reason, Lewis, because I wasn't sure about the status of the groin injury. And in the first round, it's like, I might turn out to be right about this. And that didn't ever come to fruition. It looks like, you've got a few days now before the Sweet 16. And then if you advance on to the Elite 8, you've got some time to be able to recover. And the recovery, Lewis, is the key thing where it's like these younger college players, it's like the next day they can bounce back from an injury. It's like, I'm not quite as limber as I was in my youth.
I think he said, well, and what's so wild too, I think they said during the broadcast, he had said, I'm at like 60%, 22 points in the second round. You're like 60%. Okay. Like the math is not mathing good, but
hey, we got to add a 40 piece if he gets back to 100, Lewis.
Yeah, that's how that works out. That's how that works out.
So you've got Houston as the team to beat. I guess I would go chalk and say, hey, let's go Alabama, just considering that the Crimson Tide came into the tournament as the number 1 overall seed. But beyond that, Lewis, I look at each of these matchups, and I know every year it's like the lottery, but some years you have it go really according to chalk. And I think everyone's brackets this year just are in complete shreds. There was no way to predict what happened here this opening week. And look, if my team's out of it, I root for chaos. That's just me. But you brought something up earlier too, to where you do need some of the blue bloods in there. And at least you still have UCLA in this tournament. And it's like, you look at it from the TV network perspective, where we say we don't like blue bloods, but guess what, Lewis? We tune in time and time and time again to see said blue bloods when it comes to the TV production.
You watch them because you love them, or you watch them because you hate them. And I think too, Houston, you mentioned Alabama, and I mean, they felt like the only 1 seed that didn't struggle at any point in time this weekend. So, they feel very dangerous. The one team who is not a 1 seed, so let's remove Alabama and Houston from the equation. The one team I look at, man, they feel dangerous, is UConn. The Huskies just they crashed the boards so hard. Like they crush offensive rebounds, defensive rebounds. They play with that kind of style of basketball that travels and works well no matter who they're matched up against. And St. Mary's, who they beat on Sunday, is no slouch. Like St. Mary's beat Gonzaga earlier in the year. They were right there for the Western Conference or the West Coast Conference title, like they always are. St. Mary's is no joke. And I know there was an injury with St. Mary's in the middle of that game, but UConn in the second half, they were down 8 in the first half. They steamrolled in the second half. I view UConn as a very dangerous team moving forward. They're matching up in the Elite Eight against Arkansas. So that's going to be fascinating. And then if they were to advance, they get the winner, UCLA, Gonzaga. I don't know. Watch out for the Huskies would be what I say going into the Sweet 16.
Yeah, coached by Dan Hurley, and Blue Devils fans are familiar with the Hurley family. Dan Hurley, the brother of the former Duke legend Bobby Hurley, and the youngest son of high school Hall of Fame coach, perhaps the best ever in the history of high school basketball, Bob Hurley. So the Hurley family, no surprise there. And a player on UConn to watch, Lewis, as we start to wrap up here, UConn's Adama Sanego, first player to average 25, 10, and get 70% shooting first 2 games in the tournament since Blake Griffin in 2009. So,
pretty good company.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Lewis, any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
Let chaos reign. I hope my bracket, my bracket's not, I don't want to be that guy that talks about his bracket. Okay. But I will.
Do you still have your champion? Do you still have your champion in your bracket?
Houston is my champion. I had Memphis in my national championship game. So, that was not good. But I think I've got 6 of 8 Elite Eights left and 3 of 4 Final Fours. For me, it's all. I have San Diego State upsetting Alabama this week, so we'll see. That's going to be the big one for me and my bracket. If that ends up coming through to fruition, I'm going to be feeling really good. But my Final Four remaining is San Diego State, Houston, and UConn.
You're in good company, Lewis, because I picked Marquette and Golden Eagles got bounced. So, anyways. This has been another edition of WRAL Triangle and Two. Lewis, you're the absolute best. I want to thank you. I want to thank Capital Broadcasting Company, and we'll be with you each week here on WRAL Triangle 2 as we move further and further into the NCAA tournament. It's weird not having Duke, UNC, or NC State all out of the tournament now here on the Monday following the opening weekend of the NCAA tournament. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care. So long.